Some of the most criticized films on YouTube are Disney's recent movies, particularly the live-action remakes. Many people consider these remakes to be quite stale, not adding anything to the original animated stories. But despite poor to middling reviews, audiences driven by nostalgia still pay to go and watch the live-action remakes. And that's exactly why Disney will keep pumping them out. Remakes and sequels have been Disney's main content strategy for a while now. But recently, since The Little Mermaid's release and the live-action Moana announcement, it has made me wonder what happens when Disney runs out of things to remake. Probably the easiest option is for Disney to acquire more studios and production companies to gain access to more intellectual properties, or IPs. This will increase their supply of source material for adaptations, spin-offs, and reimaginations. This is the easiest option because Disney's already been playing this card by acquiring Marvel, Lucasfilm, and 20th Century Fox over the last few years. But acquiring other companies costs money, and this option just feels like Disney is buying their way out of the hole they've dug themselves into, rather than solving the root cause of their issue. But what is their main issue? In many ways, it's exactly the same as the Pixar problem, which, if you're interested, you can learn about in my last video. Disney's current strategy is about taking something that worked, like the live-action Cinderella, and applying the same production process, or formula, to other similar material. It's a really efficient way of creating films, but it's also so formulaic that it rarely brings anything new to the table. Meanwhile, creating new original content would be a great way for Disney to dig themselves out of this hole. But their current operations prevent them from going back to their creative roots and create new original content. That's the problem with constantly applying an efficient filmmaking process over and over again. Practice makes perfect, so the filmmakers at Disney get really good at using that one process. But it doesn't help them practice thinking outside of the box to do things differently, which is what you need to create innovative, original content. So what can Disney do now? Enter Apple. It was a pretty big week last week in the tech world. Apple formally announced the Vision Pro, their new AR/VR headset, with Disney's Bob Iger making a brief cameo at the conference to announce the Apple and Disney partnership. This little cameo has really gotten the people talking, and wondering whether this is foreshadowing that Apple might buy Disney, which made me wonder, is this Disney's way to save themselves when they run out of stories to remake? Looking back, there have always been rumors about a deal between Apple and Disney, especially around the time when Disney bought Pixar. At that time, Steve Jobs was still the majority shareholder at Pixar, and because of the acquisition, he became a board member at Disney. Along the way, this also meant that he got to know the execs at Disney really well, befriending Bob Iger, Disney's infamous quote-unquote deal-maker. Of course, back then, in 2006, an Apple and Disney deal wouldn't have made much sense. This was the time when Apple was just about to release the iPhone, and Disney was in the middle of releasing sequels to the popular Pirates of the Caribbean and High School Musical franchises. Both companies were operating in very different industries with limited crossover. But then, Apple stepped into content distribution, and then gradually went behind the camera into content production. And then Disney stepped into software development. Now there's an overlap, where an Apple acquisition of Disney could be mutually beneficial. If they merged, Apple could ask Disney to make content for its Vision Pro headsets. And as we've learned from Netflix, good shows and platform-specific content can get people hooked onto new products. And as for Disney, Apple could help them distribute content straight into consumers' hands using the various Apple devices. But you might still be wondering, how would an acquisition help solve Disney's remake problem? Earlier, I mentioned that it's unlikely Disney's current operations will support new original storytelling. But what the team are good at is adapting old material to new formats. I see AR and VR as yet another way for Disney to adapt their existing content and IPs. And yes, this is definitely prolonging the age of Disney remakes. But if Disney truly embraces new technologies, it can unlock new avenues for storytelling. Being acquired by Apple could provide Disney with more of the technical know-how to create interactive stories that go beyond traditional filmmaking. Together, they could pave a new form of storytelling, using familiar characters to draw people into trying something new. But before we get too excited, This deal is pretty unlikely to happen because regulators still see Apple and Disney as companies operating in two different industries. And Apple would have to take on debt in order to buy Disney, which makes the deal less appealing for the tech giant. Regardless, the announced partnership will still help Disney with their remake problem, but an acquisition would undoubtedly be way more effective in forcing Disney to innovate and adapt. Lastly, I just wanted to point out some irony in this entire situation. In the streaming wars, Disney and Apple's major competitor is Netflix, who single-handedly created the streaming industry in the first place. And now, because of the collision of content and tech of streaming services, Netflix have indirectly brought Apple and Disney together to potentially win the war that Netflix themselves started. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely interested to see what's next for Disney and how their partnership with Apple could affect the next generation of stories that they produce. Because like everyone, I want to see a Disney that's not just pumping out the live-action remakes. I want them to be creative and bring us new formats of storytelling that's exciting and can shake things up a little bit. But what do you think of the live-action remakes? And how do you think their new partnership with Apple will change things at Disney? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more spiels in the future.